The Tobago Emergency Management Agency is tasked with coordinating a network of agencies and individuals within the island of Tobago to direct their efforts to the maximum preservation of life and the protection of property in times of disaster. Allan Stewart leads that effort as TEMA Director, and we're grateful that he made the time this evening to speak with us about preparations for Tropical Storm Gonzalo and some other issues. Good evening, Mr. Stewart. How have the last few days been for you?
Well, first of all, let me say a very good evening to you and your team, and also all of Trinidad and Tobago. For the last 24 hours, it has been quite a busy one. I'm not at the stage that I need to complain, but nevertheless, it's all in preparation for Gonzalo. We are at a stage where we feel quite comfortable based on our preparedness continuum that we are ready to deal with what seemed to be a very somewhat mild storm at this time, based on the present information that we have about Gonzalo at this time.
Now, you may say somewhat mild, but at the same time, we see people are taking preventative measures in terms of, we have the inter-island ferry says this is going to be cancelling some of its flights or its trips and other things, but you will get into that in just a bit. You speak about the last 24 hours. Now, yesterday you were in a meeting with the Chief Secretary and other stakeholders. Who were some of the people, the stakeholders that were there, and what kind of outcomes came out of that meeting?
The Tobago Disaster Management Committee is that committee that deals with planning for responding to recovery efforts, things like that, the entire disaster management cycle. So that team, which was hosted or chaired by the Chief Secretary himself, who is as our Commander-in-Chief, was able to meet just after midday yesterday to discuss some of the rudiments going forward in the planning. We're able to establish certain facts. What are some of the game plans? What are the areas of importance that needs to be dealt with? Ideally, some of those that were established was the activation of the Emergency Operations Center. So we have agreed that in principle, in the next couple of hours or so, the Emergency Operations Center here at Fairfield Complex will be activated at a level whereby later on this evening at 2200 hours, we go into full activation. So at 1800 hours, we have a partial activation where we put everything together. And then at 2200 hours this evening, we will be at full activation. Another key important measure that we took yesterday at that meeting had to do with shelters. We have about 22 buildings that we would have been able to make readily available in the event that these buildings are needed or facilities are needed for the passage of Gonzalo. Based on the analysis of the weather, based on the strength and the threat of the storm itself, we recognize that it's only necessary to have 10 shelters established at this time. And this is more so doing because of COVID. We recognize COVID to be one of the threats that we definitely have to bring into the discussion. We have brought it into the planning, and therefore we have allowed for the staffing of these shelters in a manner that there could be management of the facility if they become necessary to be activated. So at 6:30 tomorrow morning, these shelters will be made available. These 10 shelters will be made available. They are in the eastern end of the island. We have Charlottesville and Speyside. The Charlottesville Relief Center itself will be activated. The Speyside High School, the Bell Garden Multipurpose Facility, also the Betsy Soap Multipurpose Center will be available as well. The Lansome Community Center will be made available. The Castara and Golden Lane Community Center will be made available. In this end of the island, we also will see the activation of the Glen Road Community Center, along with the Canaan and Blackrock facilities. These are the shelters that will be made available. So those considerations were reached yesterday. Going forward, we were able to look at other areas as the importance of communicating with the public and keeping them abreast. And what I'm doing here is a demonstration of that keeping the public aware of what is happening, letting you know what are some of the communication tools that are available, not just you hearing from us, but also being able to communicate with us. So 211 has been established as a call center. As you know, 211 exists, and calling 211 is as calling TEMA. Also, a virtual vision app is available for persons to not just receive information, but also to be able to do crowdsourcing as well, where you can send reports to us via that means as well. We also had serious discussion with a number of our stakeholders, and they represent 4 major groups. Members of the Defense Force, also the private sector, members of the Tobago House of Assembly, and also NGOs. They were all part of that body of persons that met. And when we talk about under the Ministry of National Security, we are speaking about the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, both the Coast Guard, the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment, and also its reserves. We also look at the members of the TTFS, the TTPS. They also made themselves available and gave their commitment to this particular exercise. So we have covered most of the ground. As it relates to key agencies within the Tobago House of Assembly, the IQE, which is the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and the Environment, they will be decentralizing resources throughout the various districts across Tobago to ensure that the response mechanism works well. So these are some of the procedures that we are taking. And then we have NGOs such as REAC, ADRA, the Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross, making themselves available to provide support to this effort. So
I'll give you the chance to breathe for a second, Mr. Stewart, while asking the question, because one of the things that you spoke about is shelters. Now we're looking at Tropical Storm Gonzalo. Even before there was an A, shelters is one of the things that has been mentioned in the many Ministry of Health press briefings that dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Shelters was also or the issue of shelters was also mentioned yesterday. Are there different things in place or different protocols in place? Now, you spoke of the different shelters in Charlottesville, Speyside, Bell Garden, Canaan, Blackrock, Glen Road, etc. Are there others or safety protocols being put in place in the shelters in case they need to be mobilized and used?
Yes. The Pan American Health Organization, by which even our CMOH office and also the Division of Health and Wellness and Family Development are guided by, these policies influence how these shelters will be managed. Coming out of the training that we would have had just a couple of weeks ago, it was established that for sheltery, if you're going to be a sheltery, each sheltery required at least 100 to 110 square feet of space to be in a shelter. So you could understand the rationale for the additional buildings. And therefore, along with those buildings, you have to now have additional manpower so that you could have management of the facility based on COVID in place, how you will register people, how you will take them into the shelter, how you will lay out the sleeping quarters. For example, if I could give you an insight, you will have people sleeping head to toe, no longer parallel. The spaces between these beddings or whatever you use, whether it's mattresses or in our case, we use sleeping mats. So these are some of the prerequisites. Also, how do you manage sanitation at the shelter? How do you manage those ideas as to how people utilize the building itself, security for the building? All of those things will take into consideration, and that is what gives rise to management teams to manage these shelters themselves.
No, we're staying, or we can actually take a little break. We come back with so much more. Speaking with Allan Stewart, the director of TEMA. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're having a very engaged discussion with Allan Stewart, the director of TEMA. Now, just before the break, Mr. Stewart was speaking about the protocols that have been put in place with regard to shelter because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But that is a point I want to pick back up on, Mr. Stewart. With regard to COVID-19 and the pandemic, I'm wondering whether or not TEMA has had a specific role, one, and you also spoke about training that would have happened recently. How has the pandemic impacted on the work that TEMA has been doing, gearing up for this season and the training that needs to be done?
The awareness was always there that we have a key role to play, as you would have rightly said in your opening, that TEMA is established, or very mission is to coordinate a network of agencies and individuals to direct their effort towards the maximum preservation of life during times of disasters. So we take into consideration comprehensive disaster management. Although some people will prefer us to appear as though we only make ourselves available for storms or meteorological event, hydrometeorological event. That is very much far from the truth. We are very much intimate and involved in every major emergency that happens on the island, from a coordinating point of view and also lending resources to that. So we have been very much involved in not just the local task force here on the island, but also the national task force, where we were able to understand what is happening. We have played a key role in that as well, in the event where there was the necessity to send patients to Trinidad. We coordinate all those activities with some of the agencies that had a key role to play. Even in Trinidad, we were able to liaise with them with the timing and the dispatching and the movement of the vessels, things like that, the appropriateness of the privacy of the patients. We had a major role played in all of these areas, even the quarantine activities. We set up what you call a rapid, since Ebola, we would have established a rapid response team. And that team exists today, and they have played a very significant role during COVID. So we continue to see ourselves being part of the mechanism as it relates to coordination and management of these events.
What has the COVID-19 pandemic done to training? You spoke about training that happened. Did it slow it down? Did it make it more focused? Did you have to change the model or the method of training? Because we see a lot of things happening virtually now instead of face-to-face. How did that impact that training?
Yeah, there are some positive, and there we can speak to some of the negatives as well. But let me start with the good news. One of the things I recognize is that coming out of the new norms, which allow for virtual training or online training, we were able to have 80 persons trained because of that ability or that facility that now exists. In the past, we wouldn't be able to maybe train more than 40 persons per session based on size of rooms and the availability of feeding and doing all the things that goes along with ensuring that the training is delivered. But because it is virtual, you can have more persons attending. You are now able to bring those practical examples through pictorial effort or videos to the training and allow it to be almost a virtual reality. So this is what happened during the COVID situation. Now, the downside of that in terms of doing things virtually, it reduced the hands-on experience. So therefore, sometimes you have to spend more time deliberating on a matter. It is said to teach is to cause to learn. And therefore, if you are not doing that, then you're not really teaching. So those are the little downsides that you have with this situation when you have to do it virtually. But as I said, the pros really stood out in terms of what we gained from it. And I am quite certain, like any other discipline today, virtual training will be the way to go.
I'm very grateful that you're able to say that the pros seem to have outweighed the cons. But moving back to the preparation for Tropical Storm Gonzalo, what are some of the areas that you expect may be harder hit, or are there areas that would traditionally experience or be affected more by these types of weather systems?
Yes, certainly. The system based on the forecast, and I just had an early discussion with the meteorological service, and I really want to thank the team there. You know, they really reach out to us to help us to have to get a better understanding of the hazard. Because if you understand the hazard well, you're able to really deal with it effectively. And we are in a position where we understand what exactly is going to happen. So we know that this thing is going to pass nearer to Tobago than was expected. Two, we understand that there is a reduced strength in terms of the strength of the storm itself, which is a very positive for us. So we take advantage of that as well. We also know definitely that we're going to be south of the system, and therefore those winds that we were anticipating will not be as severe as one would have learned earlier on. So that is something that we have to keep our eyes on, and is a very positive. Addition to that, we understand that there will be a significant increase in rainfall. We were catering for 2 inches of rainfall. Now we are looking for something like 100 millimeters of rainfall. So we know it's going to be a rain event, and we are preparing for that. We know it will lend itself to slope instability. It will also, as a result of that, you will have fallen trees, you will have fallen utility infrastructure, and therefore we just want to guide our publics that you have to be careful. You have to prepare yourself for the power outages that is likely to happen if you have slow failures where lines will be down. So yes, some good news and bad news based on the latest set of information that has made itself available to us.
Now, it seems as though there's some international protocols for issuing alerts, as very specific set of parameters for issuing alerts, such as the yellow alert for Tobago and the Grenada and some of its dependencies. Can you take me through, describe what those protocols would be, thanks?
Yes, certainly. If you have a yellow, it means that in the next 48 hours or so, within that time, you are expected, if you are on a watch, you will be on a tropical storm watch. If you see the color blue, then you know you are on a tropical storm warning. So those the yellow come with the watches, and the blue and the red comes with the warning. So those are the parameters that we work with, and it helps to guide us and to know exactly how much time you have. One of the blessings of this event, you would agree with me, is that we have had quite a lot of time to prepare ourselves.
Now, just before we go, Mr. Stewart, just remind us of the areas that we can get information from TEMA, please. You spoke about a virtual vision app. How do people get onto that?
You go to the Google Play Store and you download TEMA Virtual Vision. I say again, TEMA Virtual Vision. We also have a Zello channel as well, where you can, we have joined Zello, so there is a Zello public channel where persons can actually add the channel to their devices. You go to the Google Play Store, you set up the account, and you just add us to and you're on the move where you can talk to TEMA really without even dialing a number through the Zello app. There is always persons listening. There is always somebody to answer your call. Also, our Facebook page, also our TEMA website, tema365.com. You can get us there as well.
All right, thank you so much, Allan Stewart, Director of the Tobago Emergency Management Agency, giving us some information about the role of TEMA during this event and others like it. So we want to thank you once more for your time, and we want to thank you for tuning in to this. So on behalf of the entire news team, I'm DK Roster. Thank you for joining, and good night.